It's a foggy Saturday morning in New York City. July 28, 1945. The war in Europe is over. Victory in Japan is just days away. The city is buzzing with relief, optimism, a sense that the worst is finally behind us. High above Manhattan, a B-25 Mitchell bomber cuts through thick clouds. At the controls is Lieutenant Colonel William Franklin Smith, Jr., a decorated pilot with thousands of flight hours under his belt. He's flying from Bedford, Massachusetts to Newark Airport in New Jersey. It should be a routine flight. Quick hop down the coast. Nothing he hasn't done 100 times before. But the weather has other plans. As Smith approaches the New York metropolitan area, visibility drops to near zero. Dense fog blankets the entire region. He can barely see beyond his cockpit windshield. The city below him, one of the most recognizable skylines on Earth, has completely vanished into a wall of gray mist. Smith radios LaGuardia Airport's control tower. He requests permission to land. The controller warns him visibility is terrible, less than 3 miles. The ceiling is dropping fast. The controller strongly advises Smith to stay above the clouds, to wait it out, or to divert somewhere with better conditions. Smith doesn't take the advice. He's confident in his skills. He's flown through worse. He decides to descend anyway, trying to get his bearings beneath the cloud layer. It's a decision that will change everything in the next 60 seconds. As the bomber drops through the fog, the buildings of Manhattan suddenly materialize around him like ghosts. He's flying at about 250 miles per hour, roughly 200 feet per second. At that speed, there's almost no time to react. The skyscrapers aren't just nearby, they're everywhere. He's not flying over New York, he's flying between its towers. Smith yanks the controls hard, trying to climb, trying to turn, trying to find open air. But it's too late. Directly ahead, looming out of the mist like a steel mountain, is the Empire State Building, the tallest structure in the world, and he's headed straight for it. At 9:40 a.m., the B-25 bomber slams into the north side of the Empire State Building at the 79th floor. The impact is catastrophic. The plane is traveling at approximately 200 miles per hour when it hits. The collision rips a hole 18 feet wide and 20 feet high through the building's exterior. The nose of the bomber punches through the outer wall like it's made of cardboard. Inside, the plane disintegrates instantly. Fuel tanks rupture. Over 800 gallons of high-octane aviation gasoline sprays across the 79th floor and ignites. A massive fireball erupts, engulfing everything in its path. The explosion sends flames roaring through corridors, incinerating office furniture, shattering windows, and turning the entire floor into an inferno within seconds. The 3 men aboard the bomber, Lieutenant Colonel Smith, Staff Sergeant Christopher Dmitrovich, and Navy Aviation Machinist's mate Albert Perna, are killed instantly. On impact, their bodies are thrown through the wreckage, consumed by the explosion. But the horror doesn't stop there. The B-25's 2 Wright R-2600 engines, each weighing nearly a ton, become deadly projectiles. The Wright engine tears completely through the building, exits the south side, and plummets down onto a 12-story building across 33rd Street. It crashes through the roof of a sculptor's penthouse studio, starting yet another fire. The left engine follows an even more nightmarish trajectory. It shears off upon impact and plunges straight down into an elevator shaft. The engine, still screaming downward at terminal velocity, snaps the cables of elevator car number 6. Inside that elevator is Betty Lou Oliver, a 20-year-old elevator operator who had just started her shift. She's already been burned in the initial explosion. Someone helped her into the elevator to get her down to safety to medical help. They close the doors. The elevator begins its descent. Then the engine hits. The cables snap. Betty Lou Oliver and the elevator car plunge 75 stories into the basement. It's the longest elevator fall ever survived in history. The shaft's natural air pressure, combined with the severed cables piling up beneath the car like a crude cushion, slows the descent just enough. When rescuers finally pry open the doors in the sub-basement, they find her alive. Barely. Broken, battered, but breathing. She'll spend months in the hospital, undergo multiple surgeries, but she survives. Back on the 79th floor, chaos reigns. The building houses the offices of the War Relief Services and the National Catholic Welfare Council. Dozens of workers are at their desks when the plane hits. Many die instantly in the fireball. Others are thrown across rooms by the blast. Papers ignite mid-air. Typewriters melt. The smell of burning fuel, wood, and flesh fills every corridor. One woman, Maureen McDevitt, is sitting at her desk when she hears the roar of engines. She looks up just in time to see the plane's propeller spinning directly toward her through the window. She dives under her desk. The explosion throws her across the room. She survives with severe burns. Another worker, Paul Deering, is blown out of his office by the blast. He lands in a corridor filled with flames. His clothes are on fire. He rolls on the ground, trying to put himself out. Others rush to help, smothering the flames with jackets and blankets. He makes it out alive. In total, 11 people inside the building are killed. Office workers, secretaries, people just doing their jobs on a Saturday morning. 14 dead in total, when you count the 3 aboard the plane. It's the deadliest building aviation disaster in New York City history at that time. But here's what's remarkable. The Empire State Building itself barely flinches. The impact, violent as it is, does not compromise the structure's integrity. The steel framework absorbs the blow. The floors don't collapse. The building doesn't even sway noticeably. Architect William Lamb and the construction team who built this monument in 1931 designed it to withstand hurricane-force winds. They over-engineered every joint, every beam, every rivet. That over-engineering just saved countless lives. Within minutes, the New York City Fire Department is on scene. Firefighters pour into the building, racing up stairwells with hoses and axes. They battle the flames on the 79th floor, pushing through smoke and heat. The fire is intense, fed by aviation fuel, but it's contained. The building's fireproofing, its compartmentalized floor design, prevents the blaze from spreading vertically. In less than 40 minutes, the fire is under control. In less than an hour, it's completely extinguished. The speed of the response is extraordinary. This is 1945. No modern radios, no advanced equipment, just grit, training, and sheer determination. While firefighters battle the blaze, emergency crews work to evacuate the building. Thousands of people are inside, tourists on the observation deck, office workers on lower floors. They all need to get out fast. The evacuation is orderly, almost calm. People file down stairwells in lines. There's no stampede, no mass panic. New Yorkers, as always, rise to the occasion. Meanwhile, outside on the streets of Manhattan, a crowd gathers. People stare up at the gaping hole in the building's facade. Smoke billowing out into the foggy morning air. Debris litters the sidewalks. Twisted metal, shards of glass, chunks of limestone. The wreckage of the bomber is scattered across multiple blocks. Police cordon off the area. Ambulances arrive, sirens wailing. Survivors are carried out on stretchers. The injured are rushed to nearby hospitals. Reporters swarm the scene, notebooks out, flash bulbs popping. The story is already spreading across the country. A bomber hit the Empire State Building in peacetime, in the heart of New York. The next day, Sunday, July 29th, something almost unbelievable happens. The Empire State Building reopens for business. The damaged floors remain closed, of course, but the rest of the building is operational. Tourists return to the observation deck. Tenants go back to their offices. Life, somehow, goes on. The investigation begins immediately. The Army Air Forces and the Civil Aeronautics Board launch inquiries. They need answers. How did this happen? Why did an experienced pilot fly into a building in broad daylight? The weather is the first culprit. On July 28, 1945, a thick fog blanketed the New York metropolitan area. Visibility at LaGuardia Airport was reported at under 3 miles. The ceiling, the height at which clouds obscure visibility, was dropping rapidly. When Smith radioed LaGuardia, the controller explicitly warned him about the conditions. But Smith pressed on. Investigators pieced together Smith's final minutes. He descended through the cloud layer trying to navigate visually, but in doing so, he put himself in a deadly position. At low altitude, surrounded by skyscrapers with zero visibility, he had no margin for error. Modern pilots call this flying into IMC, instrument meteorological conditions. Without proper instruments or guidance, it's a recipe for disaster. Smith's B-25 was equipped with basic instruments, but flying by instruments alone in 1945 required training and discipline. Visual flight was still the norm for many pilots, especially those used to clear conditions. Smith likely believed he could handle it. He couldn't. The investigation also examines the flight path. Smith was supposed to be heading to Newark Airport, south and west of Manhattan, but somewhere in the fog, he drifted off course. He ended up too far east, directly over Midtown Manhattan. By the time he realized his mistake, he was surrounded by buildings with no room to maneuver. The final report concludes that pilot error was the primary cause. Smith violated basic safety protocols by descending into low visibility without proper clearance or guidance. His confidence, his experience, his belief that he could handle the situation, all of it led him into a death trap. But the report also notes something else. There were no regulations at the time prohibiting flights over Manhattan. Pilots routinely flew over the city, sightseeing, taking shortcuts, showing off. The airspace above New York was essentially uncontrolled. Anyone with a plane could fly wherever they wanted. That changes after the crash. The Civil Aeronautics Authority, the predecessor to the FAA, implements new rules. Flights over densely populated urban areas are restricted. Minimum altitude requirements are established. Air traffic control procedures are tightened. The Empire State Building crash becomes a turning point in aviation safety, a wake-up call that leads to regulations still in effect today. But beyond the regulatory changes, the crash also becomes a case study in structural engineering. The fact that the Empire State Building survived a direct hit from a bomber with minimal structural damage astonishes engineers worldwide. It proves that steel-framed skyscrapers, when properly designed, can withstand tremendous impacts. The building's frame consists of steel columns and beams, interconnected by rivets. When the plane hit, the impact was distributed across multiple structural members. No single column bore the full force. The load was shared, dissipated, absorbed. It's a principle called redundancy. If one part fails, others pick up the slack. The Empire State Building was designed with redundancy in mind, and it worked. Engineers also note the building's masonry facade. The limestone and granite exterior, while beautiful, also provided a layer of protection. It absorbed some of the impact energy, preventing the plane from penetrating deeper into the structure. Modern skyscrapers with their glass curtain walls might not fare as well. The elevator shafts, too, played a critical role in containing the damage. When the left engine plunged down the shaft, it fell in a relatively controlled manner. The shaft acted like a chute, directing the debris downward rather than outward. If the engine had fallen through open floors, the destruction would have been far worse. All of these factors, the redundant steel frame, the masonry facade, the compartmentalized design, combined to save the Empire State Building from catastrophic failure. It's a testament to the engineers and builders of the 1930s who built this structure to last, and last it did. The 79th and 80th floors were repaired over the following months. The hole in the facade was patched, the offices were rebuilt. By the end of 1945, you could barely tell anything had happened. The Empire State Building stood as tall and proud as ever, but the memory of the crash lingered. The families of the victims mourned their losses. Betty Lou Oliver, the elevator operator, became something of a celebrity. Her survival was called a miracle. She gave interviews, appeared in newspapers, became a symbol of resilience. But she carried the trauma for the rest of her life. She never worked in a tall building again. The crash also left a mark on aviation history. It's often cited in discussions of building safety in aircraft accidents. Decades later, when architects designed the World Trade Center in the 1960s, they explicitly considered the possibility of a plane strike. Engineers calculated that the Twin Towers could survive a hit from a Boeing 707, the largest commercial airliner at the time. The calculations were based partly on the Empire State Building crash. The B-25 weighed about 20,000 pounds, traveled at 200 miles per hour, and caused manageable damage. A 707 is much larger, weighing over 150,000 pounds, fully loaded, but the engineers believed the tower's steel tube design could absorb the impact. They were right, in a way. On September 11, 2001, when two Boeing 767s struck the Twin Towers, the buildings initially survived the impacts. The steel frames held, but the engineers hadn't accounted for one thing: the sheer volume of jet fuel aboard modern airliners. The B-25 carried 800 gallons. A 767 can carry over 23,000 gallons. The fires from that much fuel, burning at sustained high temperatures, weakened the steel until the floors collapsed. The towers fell. The Empire State Building crash, then, taught us that buildings can survive plane strikes. But September 11 taught us that fires, not impacts, are the real danger. It's a lesson written in tragedy, learned twice, 56 years apart. Back in 1945, though, none of that could be foreseen. For New Yorkers, the crash was a shock, a reminder that even in peacetime danger could strike without warning. But it was also a testament to their resilience. The city didn't shut down. It didn't panic. It mourned its dead, tended its wounded, and moved on. The Empire State Building, that Art Deco giant, that symbol of American ambition and ingenuity, absorbed the blow and kept standing. It had survived the Great Depression. It had survived a world war. And now it had survived a plane crashing into its side. If anything, the building's legend only grew. Today, if you visit the Empire State Building, you can still see where the crash happened. The facade was repaired so well that it's nearly invisible, but historians know the spot. 79th floor, north side. A plaque might mark the location, a quiet acknowledgement of a day when fire fell from the sky and New York refused to fall with it. Lieutenant Colonel William F. Smith, Jr. was buried with military honors. He was 27 years old, a veteran of the war, a skilled pilot, a man who made a fatal mistake in a moment of poor judgment. His story is a reminder that even the best can fall victim to circumstances beyond their control. The 11 victims inside the building are remembered less often, but their names are recorded. Catherine O'Connor, Mary Lou Taylor, Maureen McDevitt, and others. Ordinary people caught in an extraordinary disaster. They went to work on a Saturday morning and never came home. Betty Lou Oliver, the elevator operator, lived until 1999. She was 74 when she died. She spent decades telling her story, always emphasizing the courage of the rescuers who pulled her from the wreckage. She never forgot what happened, but she refused to let it define her. She lived a full life, got married, had children. She survived. The Empire State Building still stands. Over 90 years old now, it remains one of the most iconic structures on Earth. Millions of tourists visit every year, riding elevators to the observation deck, gazing out over the city. Most have no idea that a bomber once crashed into the building, that fires once raged on the 79th floor, that people died in these very halls. But history remembers. The crash of 1945 is a chapter in the building story, a moment when disaster struck and the building and the city endured. It's a story of engineering triumph, of human error, of resilience in the face of tragedy. On July 28, 1945, a plane struck the Empire State Building. 14 people died, but a building survived, and so did New York. The fog that morning was just weather, but it became a metaphor. Sometimes we can't see what's ahead. Sometimes we make choices that lead us into danger. And sometimes when the worst happens, all we can do is absorb the blow and keep standing. That's what the Empire State Building did. That's what New York did. That's what Betty Lou Oliver did, falling 75 stories and living to tell the tale. It's a story of a Saturday morning in 1945, when the sky fell, the building burned, and the city carried on. Because that's what cities do. That's what buildings do. They endure. The Empire State Building is still here. Taller buildings have since been built, but few have such a story. Few have taken a direct hit from the sky and stood firm. Few have watched a city rebuild around them year after year, decade after decade. In the end, the crash of 1945 is a footnote in the building's history, but it's an important one. It reminds us that disasters can come from anywhere at any time, and when they do, what matters is how we respond. Do we collapse, or do we absorb the blow and keep standing? The Empire State Building chose to stand, and so did everyone who was there that day, who fought the fires, who pulled survivors from the wreckage, who rebuilt what was broken. That's the real story. Not just that a plane hit a building, but that the building and the people around it refused to fall. You can click in these other videos if you like this one. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel for more history documentaries.